We are exactly 1 week away from the Pro Football Hall of Fame game between the New York Jets and the Cleveland Browns. So make sure that you're here for that, because we'll be live streaming the action right here on Jaguar Gator 9. And now, on with our feature presentation. So, how about that drama between Sean Payton and Nathaniel Hackett? Look, it's one thing for me, from the comfort of my apartment, to bash Nathaniel Hackett and just how terrible he was as a head coach. Heck, I was legitimately sad when he got fired, because he provided me so much free content in terms of dumb decisions, one of which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And it is not an exaggeration, a hyperbole, or recency bias whatsoever to say that Hackett was one of the worst head coaches of all time from an in-game management standpoint, as seemingly every decision that he made was the wrong one. It takes skill to be fired before the end of your first season, not for any off-the-field issues, a la Urban Meyer, but because you just flat-out stunk. And Hackett did just that. Broncos country didn't want to ride with him anymore, and it's not hard to see why. But yesterday, completely out of nowhere, this guy right here, new Broncos head coach Sean Payton, just decided to take shot after shot against him, and outright slammed him. Instead of saying, I wasn't here, so I can't speak to anything that Hackett did, or that was last year, and I want to focus on this year, Payton decided to give one of the craziest interviews that we've seen an NFL head coach give in quite some time. Because Payton, the former Super Bowl winning coach with the New Orleans Saints, left no stone unturned in calling out Hackett for just how bad he was. In the interview with USA Today, he said, "It doesn't happen often where an NFL team or organization gets embarrassed, and that happened here." He then added, Russell Wilson's performance and antics from last year wasn't his fault. That was the parents who allowed it. That's not an incrimination on him, but an incrimination on the head coach. And after saying that he's doing everything the opposite of what Hackett did in 2022, in the cherry on top, he said, it might have been one of the worst coaching jobs in the history of the NFL. That's how bad it was. Again, for a fan to say that is one thing, but for another head coach to say that, oh man, that is juicy. When you're commenting on a coach on another team and how bad he is, forcing the other team to put out a statement lambasting you, that's when you know. But as crazy as this situation is, because I'm enjoying every second of this drama, this is not the first time that a coach has commented on another coach during training camp and how bad and how insane he was. In fact, this is not the first time that a coach with one Super Bowl appearance has commented on a coach that spent a portion of his career in Jacksonville, and one season before had yet to be the head coach of an NFL game. Because this man right here that you're watching is Jacksonville Jaguars head coach Tom Coughlin, considered by many to be one of the greatest coaches in the history of the sport, and a possible contender for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. In fact, you can learn more about Coughlin in a video I did a long time ago by clicking the card in the upper right corner. And when Coughlin was starting out in 1995, he had one thing in particular that was so controversial and so crazy that it led another coach, completely unprompted, much like Sean Payton with Nathaniel Hackett, to call him out, leading to a bizarre feud between the two men that deserves a deep dive nearly 3 decades later. Because this is the story behind the drama in 1995 between Jacksonville Jaguars head coach Tom Coughlin and Tampa Bay Buccaneers head coach Sam Wyche. Before I talk about the actual incident in question, instead of my usual thing of providing context for beforehand, we're actually going to fast forward in our story about 3 months after the incident. Because during the 1995 season, Tom Coughlin and Sam Wyche had the opportunity to square off against each other in an NFL game. On November 19th, 1995, during Week 12 of the season, the 3-7 Jacksonville Jaguars traveled to Tampa for the first time in franchise history to take on the 5-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this interconference battle. Tom Coughlin's team against Sam Wyche's team in a battle for supremacy in the state of Florida. Or should I say, second place behind the Miami Dolphins. And what we got was a super close affair and an exciting contest, which the Buccaneers won by a final score of 17-16. It was a surprisingly close game, especially since the Bucs led it 10-0 at the half, and Jaguars starting quarterback Mark Brunell got injured during the contest, meaning that the disappointing veteran backup and first pick in the expansion draft, Steve Beuerlein, had to come in and try to make something happen. But I bring this battle up because we need to talk about how the game ended before we can talk about the incident that took place 3 months before. With the Jaguars trailing this one 17-10, the Jags are pinned at their own 4-yard line, needing to drive a whopping 96 yards to tie the game up, and with their backup quarterback nonetheless, on a day where they had been struggling offensively. Amazingly enough, they did just that, converting a 3rd down and a 4th down, and eventually scoring a touchdown and finding the end zone when Beuerlein hit his tight end, Pete Mitchell, for a 12-yard score. Just like that, 96 yards later, the Jaguars were 1 point away from tying it. Except, Tom Coughlin didn't have a tie on his mind. His guys were getting injured during this game, including his starting quarterback. His team had all the momentum, with Tampa's defense completely gassed and deflated after a 96-yard drive culminating in a shocking touchdown. Coughlin was going for the win. He wasn't going to kick the extra point and play for overtime. He was going to go for 2. Now, the 2-point conversion, unfortunately for the Jags, was unsuccessful, as Beuerlein's pass fell incomplete, with the Bucs holding on and winning it by 1. But after the game, notice the handshake between the two men. Notice the handshake between Tom Coughlin and Sam Wyche. That's one of the quickest handshakes you will ever see. No talking, no eye contact, not a whole lot of contact with the hands even. The two men didn't even stop for the exchange. Usually, you'll see the coaches exchange words and stop their feet, even if it's as simple as good game. But here, there was nothing. Bit odd. And after the game, Wyche was asked about the decision by the Jaguars to go for 2. And instead of Wyche saying, "I understand Coughlin's decision," or "I agree with it," or saying, "I don't want to comment on what other coaches do," Wyche had no problem questioning Coughlin for going for 2 in that spot and trying to play for the 18-17 win. As Wyche said, "I think I personally would have kicked it and said, 'Let's go again,' because I felt like we were moving the ball well." As a side note, to learn more about another time that Sam Wyche was very outspoken, click the card in the upper right corner. So it was clear that Wyche and Coughlin had some bad blood. But like all rivalries and like all feuds, this didn't just come out of nowhere. This bizarre interaction between the two men after this Week 12 game didn't just come out of left field. Where did it all start? Well, for that, we flash back to the summertime, when training camp was underway, and when the Jacksonville Jaguars were in the midst of their first ever camp, led by first-year head coach Tom Coughlin. And if you know anything about Coughlin, and if you know anything about the 1995 Jaguars, you know just how strict Coughlin was. They didn't call it Camp Coughlin for no reason, because Coughlin had a very particular set of standards that everyone had to adhere to. He was going to try and get the most out of this expansion team however he could. Now, whether you agree with those standards or not, that's your prerogative. But if you were going to play for the Jaguars, and if you were going to play for Coach Coughlin, you were going to abide by these rules that not a lot of teams had, and that not a lot of coaches had. You were not allowed to tape the outside of your cleats. You were not allowed to wear earrings. If you were in a hotel lobby, you had to wear a collared shirt. You could not kneel during practice. If you're in a team meeting, you have to have your feet on the floor. You're not allowed to slouch, you're not allowed to cross your legs, and you're not allowed to wear a hat. Wake-up call was 7 o'clock every day, and bed check was at 11 o'clock every night. If you wanted to golf on your off days at camp, you could, but you couldn't bring your own clubs. It was a distraction and took up space, so you had to physically rent the clubs when you went out. Want to take a phone call the night before a game? Too bad. You can't do that. Want to take a water break outside of the designated time slot in practice? Too bad. You can't do that. You want to talk loudly on the team bus? Too bad. You can't do that. Want to paddle the school canoe? Too bad. That's a paddling. It was the closest thing to a military operation that the NFL had seen at training camp, and it was a giant wake-up call for a lot of people. There are so many stories about Cam Coughlin from that 1995 season and what he did to prepare his guys that it's kind of fascinating, because he truly was one of a kind, and I'll be talking about some of these incidents in future videos for sure. And look, whether you think some of these rules are a bit ridiculous, every coach has their own philosophy. And unless someone is doing something illegal, which Coughlin was very clearly not doing, it's sort of a mind-your-own-business situation. You worry about your team, and I'll worry about mine. You've got enough on your plate already as a head coach, trying to get these guys in shape and figuring out who to cut. The last thing you want to be doing is worrying about another team. If there was one rule in particular that had, of all people, Buccaneers head coach Sam Wyche up in arms. Because have you ever seen the viral tweet, or whatever the heck they're called now, about thinking that you're tougher than the sun? The goal is to beat other NFL teams. But no matter how well you play, you are not going to beat the literal star in which every planet in our solar system orbits around. You are not going to beat a big ball of gas. You're just not. And yet, Coughlin had one rule in his laundry list of rules that seemed kind of odd. You were not allowed to wear sunglasses. And I don't mean that you couldn't wear sunglasses in meetings or anything like that, where I completely understand, since you can avoid making eye contact with sunglasses and can fake falling asleep. I mean that if you were out on the practice field, whether you were a player or a coach, and you were in the hot sun, you could not wear sunglasses. In some ways, former Minnesota Vikings head coach, the late great Bud Brandt, employed similar tactics when it came to battling the cold, where he prohibited his team from warmers or heated benches or anything along those lines, because he believed that it was a sign of weakness, and that it was a matter of mind over matter. You can learn more about him by clicking the card in the upper right corner. But at least that was different, because if you were to look out, you're not going to get hurt and damage yourself and damage your long-term vision. It's not like if you ever looked up directly at the sky when it's cold outside, your vision is going to suffer. No one turns blind because of the cold. The sun? The freaking sun? Yeah, that's a different story. And Coughlin did not, under any circumstances, allow sunglasses. Along with being a sign of weakness, and that people should be able to handle the sun and should learn to see, Coughlin said, I have this thing about sunglasses. I just don't think they look good, period. No coaches, no players, and no one associated with the organization, period, could wear sunglasses while on the field. And one man took offense to this. One man had a major problem with this, but not a man on the Jaguars who was impacted by this rule. You know how sometimes you have people who are offended at things, but in reality, the people who are actually the supposed targets and victims of this have no problem with it, or at the very least, haven't spoken up about it? Well, this man right here, Sam Wyche, decided to just put Tom Coughlin on blast for this rule. He didn't put Coughlin on blast for the way that he ran camp or for his style in general. He just put Coughlin on blast for this one rule in particular. Because Wyche bashed Coughlin for his sunglass rule, and said on why he allows his coaches to wear sunglasses. I don't know. Let's see what his cataract doctor says in 2 or 3 years. We'll see how weak those eyes are then. I don't think it has a daggone thing to do with weakness. It's just being smart in the Florida sun, as far as I'm concerned. Does that hold true for sunscreen too? Is that a sign of weakness? Maybe he ought to check the ozone out before he makes that statement. In Wyche's eyes, Coughlin was foolishly declaring war on the sun, the earth, and the entire ozone layer for that matter, and it was a battle that he could not win. And Wyche, in a cherry-on-top moment, what has he ever won? I love that parting shot by Wyche for a few reasons. Number one, Coughlin was on his first season in the NFL, so it's not as though he was a struggling head coach. What has he ever won? He hasn't had a chance in the NFL to win anything. Making that statement if he was in his third season after struggling the first 2 years, I get it. Making that statement before he ever even coaches a game in the NFL? It's like asking a first-year teacher, what have you ever taught? Or like asking a new pilot, what you've ever flown. It's not the knock on Coughlin that you might think it is. Everyone's got to start somewhere. Number two, even with that aside, the comment doesn't make sense, because Coughlin's won a lot. Aside from literally winning a Super Bowl as an assistant coach for the New York Giants, he was the head coach for the previous 3 years at Boston College, where he went 17-6-1 in his final 2 seasons, where he won the CarQuest Bowl in 1993, which was the team's first bowl win since 1986, and where he had Boston College in his final season before taking the job in Jacksonville, finishing 13th in the AP poll, which was literally the second highest end-of-season ranking in school history since Oppenheimer did his thing. So telling a first-year coach he's won nothing when that's not even true is something else. At number 3, what have you won, Sam Wyche? You literally entered the 1995 season on the hot seat for losing so much. In your 3 seasons with the Bucs, you were 16-32, winning just 1 out of every 3 games. Your overall record in your 11 seasons as a head coach entering this year was 77-98, winning only 44% of your games. In 11 seasons, you've only made the playoffs twice. Over the last 4 years, you've gone 19-45, and you've had some of the dumbest coaching moments I've ever seen, one of which you can learn more about by clicking the card in the upper right corner. This is the pot meeting the kettle if I've ever seen it. This is one of those moments where both sides are probably wrong. Coughlin's probably wrong for imposing a policy where you couldn't protect yourself from the sun and where you put your long-term vision at risk. And Wyche is probably wrong for calling out a coach for no particular reason and bashing him in an incredibly hypocritical way. Also, I should note that after the 1995 season, Sam Wyche got fired from the Buccaneers for losing too much, while Tom Coughlin became one of the most successful coaches in NFL history. He made 4 straight playoff appearances with the Jaguars from 1996 to 99, enjoying unprecedented levels of success for an expansion team. He made the playoffs 9 times in his career. He engineered 2 of the biggest upsets in NFL history, with the Jaguars being the Broncos in the 1996 divisional, and the Giants being the Patriots at Super Bowl 42, and he won 2 Super Bowls as the head coach of the New York Giants. By the time his career was done, he was ranked on the side of the top 15 all-time in victories by a head coach. So, yeah. So much for what have you ever won. We don't talk about his front office stint with the Jaguars. We just don't. I don't think it's a coincidence that when the 2 teams met in 1995, as you could tell from all these clips, that Coughlin was not wearing sunglasses during the game, while Wyche was. Just a fun little side note in this bizarre feud. So whose side are you on? Are you on Coughlin's side, where he can run his camp however he wants, and Wyche should just mind his own business? Are you on Wyche's side, where he can call out Coughlin for this bizarre vendetta he has against the freaking sun? Are you on both their sides? A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B? Whoever side you're on, at the very least, I think it's safe to say that the relationship between these 2 men was not exactly sunshine and rainbows. Get your official Jaguar Gear 9 merchandise by going to jj9shop.com, and be sure to like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out a lot. Join me every Wednesday night where we'll play NFL Trivia for cash prizes at 9 p.m. Eastern over on Twitch. To learn more about the history of college football, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 8. To learn more about the history of Major League Baseball, subscribe to Jaguar Gator 7. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.